pandemic pivot, women of power, tech. I'm Cornelia Shipley, the CEO of 3C Consulting, a firm that specializes in the retention and advancement of mission critical talent. And I am super excited to be your moderator today for this critical conversation about how to pivot to a career in tech. So I want to first and foremost welcome our two panelists, Shanell Snyder, the Vice President of Agile Leadership and Development for Fidelity Investments, and Patricia Jordan, the Vice President, Enabling Processes and Technologies for Provider Engineering at UnitedHealth Group. So ladies, thank you for joining me today.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, you know, the last year has required us all to really take a really good look at where we are and where we're going. And so ladies who are watching, if you've been considering a career transition into tech or into the industry, a career specific job in tech or opportunities in the digital space, you're in the right place. So I want to start this conversation by asking for Shanell to share with us her pivot story.
Cornelia, thank you for asking. First of all, I'm honored to be with all of you here. And you started with, over the last year, we've all been introduced to tech in a different way. So like many of those here, I have become a master of social media, online shopping. And so tech just kind of happened to us in our personal lives, but professionally, Fidelity Investments over the last, let's say 3 to 4 years has been on a journey to digitally transform our business. And so our personal investing arm led the way in this, and we were really committed to that one digital transformation in our tech space, marketing, our product space, as well as other strategic functions. And our goal simply was to deliver value to our customers faster. What happened here, and this is the baseline of my career pivot, it happened to me by way of my organization. And so this agile transformation that we've been on in earnest the last, call it 4 years, has been transformative for me from a number of different perspectives. So from a career perspective, I've had to get acquainted with tech in not just my personal life, but also in my professional life. I've had to think about tech beyond the technical organization or IT function or within the technology domain, but all of the underpinnings of tech, our marketing space, our servicing space, et cetera. And so my personal story has been tech in my personal life happened to me. Tech in my professional life also was by nature of a transformation that my organization has been on. And it has been really riveting in terms of what I've learned relative to digital transformations, what I've learned related to working in an agile environment and what it actually does to stimulate how people innovate, how we deliver products in a more connected and integrated way. It's definitely been a game changer for me.
Yeah, I'll say that as a customer of Fidelity, I'm very appreciative of your pivot, to, at least in the app world. So, because I think I'm on the app at least once a day. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, Patricia, I'm curious, tell us your pivot story.
So my pivot story started a little bit earlier in my career. My background is actually in economics. I did economics as an undergrad and then financial economics as a grad school student. But throughout my career as a college student, I did dabble in tech. I took programming classes. And when it came to paying for my graduate degree, computer science just made more sense because it did pay a lot back in the 90s. And so my first pivot was using technology to fund my passion, which is financial economics. My second pivot came after I graduated. I did work in technology. I started working in telecom, solving, again, more and more complex problems, bigger data sets. And then I was approached to work in healthcare, which, as you can imagine, is 2 different fields. But The way that I synthesized it is we're solving similar problems, how to manipulate large data sets. And that's really how I got into healthcare about 20 years ago. The third pivot that I made was somewhat similar to what Shanell said in terms of it would happen to me in my organization, because I did go from managing on-premise systems and applications to now pivoting to the cloud. So now is how do we solve problems of not just of how do we scale on premise, but how do we scale in the cloud? How do we not go too crazy? How do we make sure we're being good stewards of our resources and not just playing with the shiny new things in the cloud? So you added a level of governance to also application security and costs that I was doing before. So I've just had to pivot a lot, sometimes because I wanted to, but other times because the market demanded it.
Yeah, so you bring up a really good point. You both do around this notion of whether or not you have life happen to you or you be in the driver's seat of that. And so for people who are really considering pivoting to tech proactively, why is it a really good time to do that? And I'm going to ask you, Patricia, to start.
So it's a great time right now because there's a lot of different problems that a lot of different industries are trying to solve, right? And we all have something that we can bring to the table. If you abstract which technology you're using or which platform you're on, and whether it's AWS or Azure or Google, right? Or whether you're on premise or in the cloud, we're all trying to be better, faster, cheaper, right? And so we could all bring something to the table from that perspective, and skills are transferable. I mean, again, I came from economics and financial economics, and here I am managing a team of AWS cloud engineers that could run circles around me.
Yeah, yeah. Shanell, is there anything you'd add?
You know, I'd add just at a macro level, you know, you look at some of the statistics, and employment in tech occupations is growing by 13% between 2020 and 2030. And to a large degree, that's the fastest growth that we'll see across a number of different occupations. And so to Patricia's point, the opportunity is now. In her opening, she shared the education that she's acquired in the tech space. That's expanded. She shared insights on people that she's now connected with. That's expanded. There's more network groups available, and funding. These are places that we haven't been able to tap into in the past that are growing exponentially. And so now is the time.
Yeah. Well, Shanell, you were talking about something Patricia said earlier, and I'm curious your thoughts about the transferable skills people have that could set them up for success in tech and how they should be positioning those skills.
Yeah, it's a great question because you would seemingly think if my career hasn't started in tech or it hasn't started with having a computer science background or some type of software engineering background, that tech is not the place for you. But there are some soft transferable skills that are critically important. I think about what's important to Fidelity. Customer centricity and customer service is key to our success. That is transferable regardless of what profession you're in and or the industry. Other skills that are critically important also include leadership skills, problem-solving skills, agility, creativity, and innovation. Remember, to be in tech does not necessarily mean you have to be in a tech world. We're living in a digital and information age where a lot of careers center in tech, but absolutely transcend beyond tech, or at least the core technical roles.
Yeah. So, Patricia, when you hear that, is there anything you'd add?
No, I mean, I think Shanell said it all. I mean, when you're talking about tech, we're talking about product managers, we're talking about business analysts, we're talking about data scientists. There's a lot that's not pure tech or software engineering or developer. So tech everyone has a place in tech, and it's really just figure out where your place is. And the other thing that I would add is we talked about training. Like there's so many free options out there or very cheap options to scale up and skill up. And if you want to be certified, then you could also do that. You don't have to be funded by a company because they've made it more cost effective.
Yeah, and Patricia, you said just a moment ago about this notion of being in the tech space and tech being a place where everybody could come. And I don't know that the narrative has always been that tech was a space for us. And so I'm curious, how do the two of you, and I'm going to start with Patricia, how do you guys navigate being in a space that hasn't historically been perceived to be welcoming to us as African American women?
That's a good question, and it's funny because I've been asked this question maybe 3 times in the last month because of different panels that I've been on, and this is really just something that maybe I've chosen to ignore, right? One thing that I do is I rest on my abilities and on my knowledge. I know what I know. I know that I'm in a room for a reason, and then I bring that reason into every conversation I have. I will also say that I've had very good mentors and supervisors in my way that would have helped pave the way and been advocates for me, whether I'm in the room or not. So I feel like for me, I've probably had an easier path than others because I did have that support system. But at the end of the day, when I started my career as a database administrator, I was typically the only woman and definitely the only Black person in the room, and that continues until now. Like even in my peer meetings, I'm the only one, and it's just a really making sure that I get out of my own way and do my job because I deserved this job that I got. It wasn't given to me, I earned it, right? And so I make sure that I remind myself of that every meeting that I attend and every email that I send as well.
Yes, I heard a couple of things in your response, right? There's the self-confidence, there's sponsorship, advocacy, and then what I'm going to label as kind of community support, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being in community in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Shanell, when you hear that list, what else would you add as you think about trying to navigate a space that historically hasn't been perceived as welcoming for us?
You know, I want to hit on something that Patricia shared a moment ago, and it's a role that we've mastered. We have mastered being the only one. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's the world that we live in, and it's a stigma that to some degree has largely held negative. What I heard Patricia say is I shifted my mindset on what that stigma actually means and what it means for me and my career and the success of my career. And so when I think about being the only one, that's the true opportunity to make who you are shine. So think about the skills and capabilities that you bring to the table. Think about the network, the sponsorship, the advocacy that you could gain from those around you in the tech space, outside of the tech space, but with some connectivity to the space. Those are all critical in this now more social crowdsourcing type of world that we live in. Your network is key. I sometimes hear in different circles, it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's both. And I think that the moment when we start to embrace that is the moment when we really realize our full potential.
Yeah, and I would say it's not only who you know, but more importantly, who knows you.
That's
right?
true.
You know, I mean, you think about, the conversation the three of us were in a couple of days ago and some things that Elisa said to us about this opportunity. And it's about, where are the spaces and places where your name is being said in rooms you don't even know that it's being said in. So it's important, right? Not only that you've got the conversation happening in terms of who you know, but as important in terms of who knows you. Shanell, you brought up a good point, and I'm going to throw a curveball question at Patricia, so hang on, which is, in the midst of the last 18 months and thinking about being in spaces and places where you might not see yourself, how are you taking care of you in the midst of that?
Well, I had to start by giving myself a little bit more grace than I used to, right? It's been easier, and I think we talked about it a couple of days ago, as you see others in their living rooms, or you see kids come into the Zoom meetings, or you hear the dog barking at the UPS guy. So it kind of gave a jolt. We all realize that we're working with people, but that crystallized it, right? And then I also had to be more deliberate about when I stopped work. I think all of us have noticed that now that the commute has been reduced, it's easier to work longer hours and forget that you need to eat and forget that you had to take care of things. So I really had to be more deliberate about marking time off of my calendar after a certain time. So I'm not taking 6 p.m. meetings just because I'm here at home anyway, and budgeting time for myself, for my family, with my husband, and making sure that we're staying human and a family, even in the space of all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Shanell, what one kind of hack, to use a good tech term, are you doing from a self-care perspective?
Oh, if I will answer that question in just one moment, but I don't want to lose the point of what Patricia said. Self-care and setting boundaries is the key. And your ability to set personal boundaries and professional boundaries, not just in the time when you're available via email or the time when you're available to answer calls. I'm guilty of that myself. But also in the expectations that others have of you. I'm childless. And so sometimes in the world that I live in, you sometimes feel like others expect more of you because you don't have the commitment to childcare, or you don't have the commitment to ensuring that the kids are taken care of during school and or after school or even on the weekends. And so one of the things that I did is I have a COVID puppy. And what that allowed me to do is it forced me, regardless of how much I wanted to do a little bit more work because I have a little bit more time, it forced me to have to get up and go take a walk and take him out and spend time with him. It's the personal things that you do for yourself that are going to be key in not just transitioning to tech, but just caring for ourselves in general. So I didn't want to lose that moment of what Patricia shared in terms of her self-care, but my hack was a little puppy.
There you go. We too are childless by choice, and
Yes.
It's interesting having to navigate, your colleagues, the folks that work on my team, the folks that work on your teams, to say, yeah, I'm available, but I have a spouse and I have family and I have other commitments, and just because I don't have, little ones running around in my life doesn't mean that that's not true. I think one of the things we take for granted as women of color is that we don't have permission to set those boundaries. And so I'd invite all of you listening to take this as your permission slip to really set the boundaries that you need so that you can be healthy and show up to do the job that the organizations who've hired you have hired you to do. It doesn't make any sense to do work that you have interest and passion for and have that work burn you out. Right? You don't want that as your answer. Well, I know as vice presidents in your organizations, you didn't get there alone, right? There were sponsors and mentors and advocates that supported you. And so, Patricia, I'm curious, what role has mentorship and sponsorship played for you? And how did you go about getting those mentors and sponsors?
So I believe it played a big role. Obviously, my skills and my talent and my outcomes played a role as well. But we all know that there are people that work 200% and still don't get that recognition. And so for me, that sponsorship and that advocacy really helped because they helped amplify my outcomes. And also, I was put on certain projects that had nothing to do with what I was working on because of the agency that I had and because of the sponsorship that I had. You'd hear people say like, Patty can do that because she did X, Y, Z. Well, who is this Patty? And then they would introduce me, and and that's how it went. And I've honestly also started doing that as well so that I can bring people up with me because, as we mentioned, there aren't a lot of us, and if more people see us, then they'll understand that they can get here. But to go back to your question, it played a big role.
Perfect. So, Patricia kind of shared her perspective with us, Shanell, about this concept. What are your thoughts about sponsorship and advocacy and the role that it plays in your career?
Yeah, similar to Patricia, I have had sponsors over my career. I equally would not have been where I am without them. The interesting thing about sponsors is sometimes they are silent sponsors, and you learn their sponsorship by way of your interaction with another person who says, hey, I was in a conversation with Patricia and she talked about a body of work that you were leading and the impact that you had with that body of work. And I just wanted to let you know that it was referenced in a meeting, and X, Y, and Z people were also at that meeting as well. And what I think is the key in that moment is to seize it. So when you know that there's someone that has represented your work, especially in a very positive light, I would reach out to them. So my experience is when those moments have happened, I've actually forged a personal relationship with the person that was advocating for my work. That does two things. One, that gives them a continued foundation to advocate for your work, but it also allows them to see the personal side of you. And so when they're advocating for you, they're advocating for the whole you. Seize those opportunities when they happen. I can't underscore, I think about the role that I'm in now in Agile leadership and development. When we initially started this transformation journey, I wasn't familiar with Agile. I wasn't familiar with the power of what it does for digital transformations. And I had a sponsor who presented the opportunity to me, and we probably talked about it for several days. And because of my trust in her and the work that she had been doing, I signed up to do the work for a year. Here we are 4 years later, and I've been leading in the Agile transformation space since then, and continue to build my portfolio of work based on that immediate kind of interaction with that sponsor and knowing that she had my best interest in mind.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and as an entrepreneur, I'll say sponsorship makes all the difference for us too, right? I mean, and I know there's some, tech entrepreneurs in this virtual room with us today. And if your business and you as the leader of your business, isn't mentioned and isn't being advocated for by people who you don't know or who have heard of your work, it's going to be really hard to get your technology in the hands of people who really can benefit from it. So it's not just about having sponsors. If you're in a corporate role, it's about having sponsors for you as a person in the work that you do, regardless of the setting that you do it in. It makes all the difference. It really, really makes all the difference. Well, I'm curious, Patricia, you brought this up earlier about certification, right? And it's all often positioned as a real, I won't say easy way, but as a ticket to entry into tech. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, as you think about hiring people, what role do certifications play? And is that a path that, we as women of color, as African-American women should be thinking about as we're making some of these pivots?
I think it's definitely one of the tools that you can have in your toolkit. It really depends on the certifying body and what role you're trying to get into. But Shanell, for example, is an Agile. If you have your PMP, if you have your Scrum Master, like that would be helpful. If you're trying to get into technology and you want to be a Scrum Master for a team that's in the cloud, knowing AWS or Azure would be helpful, and that certification would also be helpful. But I think it really depends. I mean, I mentioned earlier that I started off as a database administrator. A lot of people know that some of the database certifications, I'm not going to mention names, I don't want to get anyone upset, are not as critical to showcasing skill set as others, because you can study for them. You don't really have to have any hands-on experience. So I think it's very good to do your research and understand what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to demonstrate with that certification. So definitely one of the toolkits, I would not just rest on that. Practice. A lot of these platforms allow you a free account to practice and really get hands-on experience. I would value that a lot more. Do little projects, document it, just like having a diary, have a digital diary of all the projects that you've worked on so that you can showcase that at an interview, for example.
Yeah, that's a good point about that digital diary, right? You have to have some sort of brag book that's available to you to be able to say, here's the proof in the pudding that I can do this. Exactly. I know, Shanell, you've done a lot of work in this space and have helped, people prepare to be promoted in advance. And so what role do you see certifications playing in that process?
I think it's critical. There's conscious decisions that every professional makes in terms of extending their education, making transitions into new roles, etc. I'd advise people to think about small steps sometimes. So capabilities like Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, a number of them are free to be able to access. And that gives you the opportunity to almost stick your toe into learning some of these capabilities. And it's the step before going full stream certification. It's important to not just be able to show what you've learned by way of the certifications, but to your point, also your ability to actually do the work. That hands-on learning is critically important. So when you're actually looking to share your kind of capabilities with the hiring manager or someone in the tech space that may be looking for an opportunity or an organization that you may be looking at, I would think about what's the digital portfolio that you can share? What's the skills that you've built that are transferable, as well as what's some of the technical, formal or informal learning or training that you've taken, and also have the ability to actually demonstrate it. So when you're talking to someone, especially a hire manager in the tech space, you want to be able to speak in their language. And you want to be able to have them to be confident in your ability, that you are digitally savvy, that you are aware of the technology that you're looking to work on and you're looking to build. Those are all key to presenting yourself as a potential candidate, to interacting with the hiring manager in a meaningful way, and in many cases, getting the job.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about, because we've been talking about certifications, and it made me think about the concept of personal branding, right? And I do a lot of work with my clients around this concept, especially around the concept of the question, how are things going? Right? You get asked that question in organizations all the time. And I teach my clients never to answer that question with the word fine or some derivative of fine. Last year when we were at Women of Power, I actually had everybody raise their hand and promise that they wouldn't answer that question with fine or some derivative of fine. And so I'm curious how in your day-to-day interactions with your peers, your colleagues, and most importantly, your leaders who are going to be making decisions about you getting promoted in the future, how are you branding yourself and really helping your organizations understand the problems you want to be known for solving?
Oh, Cornelia, it's almost like I want to ask you that question.
Well, you know, as a coach, I have an answer. I have an answer.
Yeah. Perhaps we lead with that.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I think what I teach my clients anyway is to think about this. The first and foremost, what is the problem you want to be known for solving? Right? Each of you solves a problem for your organization. What's that problem that you want to be known for solving? The second, if somebody says, how are things going? The second thing to think about is, what are you working on that either you want the person you're talking to know about, or that they need to know about, right? If I work for you, Patty, and you come to me and you say, how are things going? You don't want to know that things are fine. You want to know what's happening with the project that I'm working on. What are the challenges I might be facing? What are the barriers I need knocked down, to be able to support me to get the work done? Things like that, right? So it's easy to answer that question. If you're thinking about what you want to be known for, most importantly, and the help that you need to get the work done without asking for it that way. So it's kind of like, here's the challenge I'm facing. Here's how I'm going to handle it. What do you think? Right? Well, I know we are almost out of time. Can you believe it? This conversation has flown by. So I'm curious, I'm going to start with you, Patty. What final thoughts might you have for our audience?
I think first I want to start with kind of complementing what we talked about when we talked about sponsorship, because mentorship is another, I guess, facet of that. I would encourage people to look for mentors, and a mentor is not necessarily someone that's in your line of your hierarchy or someone who's in your space. a lot of my mentors have been more on the business side, like the GMs of the companies or completely outside. And what I try to do is understand, to your point, the problems that they're trying to solve and how can I use my role in technology to help them solve it, right? Because at the end of the day, companies need money and these GMs need to be profitable, right? And so where I would like to land is that, again, we all have this brand that we're trying to build. Part of it is technology. We have these skills that we want to bring to the table. Part of it is the soft skills that Shanell referred to. We have project management, we have collaboration, we have being able to put people together at the same table to talk about these conversations. Those are skills that are also very necessary. But then we also have this growth path that we want to continue on, right? We're both vice presidents. I know that we don't want to stay at this vice presidential level. Either we want to expand into other roles or we want to go into other spaces. But how can we keep growing and how can we keep finding more and more challenging problems or things that we need to keep top of mind? So really don't rest on your laurels. Just keep on pushing yourself to get to the next level, whatever that next level might be.
Absolutely. Shanell, any final thoughts from you?
The only thing that I would say, at the risk of being duplicative, is seize the moment. The opportunity is in front of us to lean into the space in a really, really big way. We talked about earlier how much the tech industry itself is growing, how the number of opportunities, job opportunities in this space will multiply. I think about where Fidelity is today. In 2021, or even the second half of 2021, we've opened roughly about 800 technologist roles. That's 2 times what we opened since 2017. And so when we think about not just within Fidelity Investments, but the number of other industries and organizations that have these opportunities available, like, there's no reason why I wouldn't say just try it. Just try it. Even if you're not like geared towards the tech space, marketing helps to deploy against or deliver against technology platforms. UXD designers, etc. They all have some relationship to the tech space. I'd just say, just try it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think the only thing I would add to what the two of you said was to think about being of service.
Yes.
You know, and to that end, I want to thank both of you for being of service to the Women of Power tech community today. Thank you both for sharing yourselves and your hearts and your experiences to really help as we think about, as a collective community of women of color, of African American women in particular, as we try to navigate our careers in tech and out of tech. So thanks so much, you guys.
Thank you, Cornelia. And thank you, Shanell.
Thank you all.